Okay, so the goal today is to reset up all of my productions and everything on the Mountain Hill map. The first thing I'm going to do though is set up my main farm, and I think I've got the perfect spot picked out, overlooking the valley. My primary goal for playing on the Mountain Hill map is I'm going to set up a beef production map and dairy production map to start with. So my first goals in doing that are going to be to get my road systems connected and everything for auto drive, and to lay out my main farm area where I will operate from. Um, Everything seems to be a little herky-jerky today for some reason. Um, Either that or I'm driving drunk. I'm not sure which. I'm pretty sure it's not driving drunk though. Um, so, uh, I love this Mountain Hill map. It's very well laid out, beautiful to to play on map with with extra productions available for the map and everything. Most of those I don't use. I like having them because I like seeing the crops change around me too. And which is part of my goal with playing the game is just being a relaxing time and getting back to my roots some. Again, this doesn't look anything like where I was a kid at. I was a kid in Central Texas with lots of brown and lots of mesquite trees, and this map is not really sure where this is set at. I'm thinking possibly somewhere in Europe. I don't know. Um, Never was able to really find the information on it. There's a couple of versions of this map. There's a map with that goes under the Mountain Hill version 2. This is Mountain Hill version, or not version necessarily. This is just Mountain Hill map is all this is. So what I'm going to attempt to do is this field area here is going to be the first field that I buy. I'm going to use this higher section in the center as my starting point and do a little bit of leveling to allow me to create my primary farm here on this mountaintop. Primarily for the view. It's just an aesthetic issue from here. So as you can see, this is a pretty high point and drops off on both sides. What I would like to be able to do is probably come up this hillside here a ways and edit that into a flatter configuration, which will allow me to put my buildings in and my roads, and so probably what I'm going to work towards doing is I want to get up about halfway up this hillside here That's why I laid the tracks out there, as I wanted to be able to see kind of where I was at. We'll go to landscape mode, flatten. We're going to make this as strong as we can, which if you'll notice the color change there, it goes from kind of a transparent, semi-transparent to darker target color, and then we're going to make it as large as we can. And we are going to follow the field line. First of all, we're going to have to purchase the field. I'm getting ahead of myself there. So use your cursor to locate the field that you're in, which I'm in field 80 here, which has main highway access. And my goal is going to be to come up about halfway up this rise and take the height of this down to where it's good and flat, and then use that big flat section for my farm area. So we're going to select, open it up into the buy sell window with the left click down, select, and X buy. Now we go back to where we were before, which was the construction. We're going to select that and go to the landscape, and we're going to have to go back out to, we're going to make it as strong as we can, as large as we can. You can see there what we're doing, and we want to pick about halfway up that rise there and start flattening from there. Just kind of have to follow along. I use the edge of the field as kind of a meter for that. This is going to be a much larger area than I actually require to do what I want. You can always reclaim what you do not use as field later on if you want to. And be sure to leave enough room between the roadway and where you're working. That allows you to have that, it's going to allow you to shape that edge a little better than if you just jump off in the middle there. If you get too close to the roadway, you'll wind up with a lot of headaches later on, because as you remove that, most of the roadways inside the game are actually created as models, and then either placed as an object within the game, or some of them use a spline system to actually create the roadways inside the game, which I believe is the case with this map. Because the roadways tend to follow the terrain really well in here, so try to keep some relatively soothing music going. I would prefer to be the Bob Ross of Farming Simulator rather than the Ozzy Osbourne. You can get a little, and when you're utilizing the game as kind of a relaxation device, as I do, just makes more sense to kind of stay calm and soothing. And I tend to play semi-realistic. I'm not going to say I play realistic because there are some of the guys out there that are truly into making the game as difficult as they can, or in my opinion, as difficult as they can. Um, Again, since I'm not playing for the realism level that some of these folks are, I find that I use equipment that is, we'll say, functions in a semi-realistic fashion. I don't, let's put it this way, I don't bale or harvest at 100 miles an hour. I tend to be more of the baling and harvesting in the 15, 16 mile an hour range. To me, that's not realistic, but it's passable for realism. You know, if you wanted to get realistic about it, what I'm doing here is goes against a lot of the tenets of realism that some people want to create inside the game. Some of the neat new tools that are in the 22 versus the 19 or 17 is one that I'm about to use here, which is the ramping tool. What I'll do here is I'll come out pretty good ways, and then I'm going to actually ramp this back up to meet up here. And the ramping tool in this game is pretty fantastic. Allows you to really get some. You have to get down here on it sometimes too. Really gets to where you can do some really nice work, making things as nice as you can get them. What I will more than likely do with this area here is I'm probably going to put all this in grass that doesn't wind up being some sort of a path. So what I'm going to do now is come over here where this rise is, and I'm going to smooth that out just a little bit there, and have my autosave set up so I don't lose things. I've had a couple of crashes that have killed a whole map, and one learns his lesson after a little while with that. But so I'm going to start with the painting a little bit now. What I like to do on these higher areas here, like this, is I like to actually make that a rock texture. And don't be afraid to go up next to the grass a little further. You can always come back and paint the grass back in a little bit if you need to. but it doesn't look right if you don't get it high enough up there. So don't be as timid as you could possibly be there. Again, there's nothing in this game that can't be changed back. Um, and even with autosave set up on here, you can actually even, if you really mess something up, you always have the ability to go back, let's say 2 saves or 3, and revert that map back to what it's like right there, where I kind of went past, got up under that tree. That wasn't what I was intending on doing, but I did it anyway. And so what I'll have to do here in a minute, and I suggest finishing what you're doing and then going back and repairing those things. It gives you the opportunity to miss things that you might not miss otherwise. But, it also keeps you from switching back and forth. You'll find when you switch back and forth between the paint objects in this game, occasionally you get into a situation where you wind up switching back and forth so much that let's change our brush shape, and we're going to come back and we're going to knock that down all along there like that. What happens is when you go switching back and forth between brushes or brush objects in this game, you'll find that occasionally, for whatever purpose, and I don't know, I'm sure Giants has some giant or great purpose for it, but what happens is the brushes don't switch the way you might actually think they should or want them to. And especially having to do with brush shape. Let's say like right now I have this circle brush selected. Well, let's say I want to go to the square brush. Well, that's a Y on my handheld control. There's keyboard controls for it too. Those of you guys that have keyboard controls for that. But I find that I switch back and forth. It tends to create an issue for me in that sometimes it doesn't switch like I want it to. And then I wind up with ill-shapen areas or not painted areas, or where I intended to put stone, I wind up with grass, and I wind up having to go back and fix it. And so it is my opinion, and it is only an opinion, that the best thing you can do is use one item at a time till you're done with it, and then if you have to come back and fix something, come back and fix it. Now, one thing I'm going to do here is I want to get down on this body here like this, and I want to find this angle. There's a good opening right here, and I want to use that. Make my brush a little smaller and start filling right there. Now, So when you come to an area like we have here, um, where we have the crops still on the ground, if you'll come in and paint that out, it will stay gone as long as you own the property. If the property is, now you have to uh, turn it on where it allows you to edit anywhere, or you can only edit your property. So I have the mod installed that allows me to edit anywhere, and the reason I have that in there is because sometimes I want to work on a roadway area, and those in this particular map do not belong to you, those roadway areas. And so it's much easier if you keep that mod installed, which will allow you to work these road edges and things down that you want to do. You find that you can kind of steer your painting tools with your control as you go. It makes your life considerably easier that way anyway. As you can see, we're still a little steep here. There's nothing we can't climb. We don't need to build an S track or anything for that. I don't think we're going to have any trouble with the trucks climbing it or anything. That's where we do wind up with an issue sometimes in game is you wind up with a horsepower issue trying to get up an area. And if you noticed, I had a little bobble down there at the bottom. Got over into that next field over. So just so you know, what will happen is when the game harvests and replants that, it'll actually fix that for you. You don't have to go in there and fix that right now. So this tiling stone texture that they have in here is actually a pretty good one. There are places to get a lot of really good tiling textures. Some of them are pretty pricey though, so one of the things that I did is I used to use SketchUp all the time when SketchUp was in when it was a free Google service, and since they've actually changed that, so now SketchUp is a paid thing. Let's see, I think we're going to go with that texture for this. So it's a gravel texture. But what you can actually do is once you figure out how to actually put the textures in the game, there's actually some texture repositories for that used to be for SketchUp, and the textures there you can actually pick up for nothing. All you have to do is register an account, and you can actually utilize those textures there for free. And then you can use there's a couple of programs, and I'll do some things on that later too, where you can actually create the multiple textures, things like where you have the albedo and you have the bump maps and all that. There's a couple of really good free programs that you can utilize to take a good texture that is a tiling texture, and you can actually turn it into what you would like to have for the game. Works with some brick, some stone. Um, some of the textures in, like this one here, for instance, this gravel texture, aren't the greatest textures for the game. And but they're easy to use. They tile well. They're just sometimes not as realistic as you would like them to be. So back to what we're trying to do here. So I'm creating this flat spot on top of the mountain here, or on top of the hill actually, so I can come back in, and this will be where my primary silos, my tractor barns are. Probably won't have the cattle right here. I've found that one of the limitations of the farm simulator games, especially, well, not especially 22, but including 22, are their ability to deal with multiple pieces of equipment in one location. So what you'll wind up doing is, if you get too many of one thing parked in one area, you'll start getting what I refer to as lag spikes. I'm sure there's some sort of a technical term for it, but it will actually start lagging out a particular area. Every time you go there, it'll just be difficult to function. So I try to keep things kind of spread out a little bit. I have a primary farm area like I do here, like what I'm creating here. But then I will actually have equipment areas scattered around other spots on the map. I use the CB radio mod, which is what you just heard. It gives you time checks and things like that. But when you actually have workers in the field plowing, or whatever the case is, or in combines for that matter, it will actually give you an audible notification when that tractor is finished with a job and ready to go to the next one, or the combine operators need to be unloaded. That's a very handy little add-on for that. And if someone's interested in it, if you'll drop a note in text, or I'll drop a note in the comments, I will look that up again and get that for you. It's actually pretty easily modded too. I've looked at some of the ability to mod that and change some of the commands, not necessarily commands, excuse me, the responses to particular things in the game. It really does need to have some updates. I think whoever created it thought they were creating something that would sound realistic, and they did actually a pretty good job. One of the things that it does is when a combine needs to be unloaded, it says it's stuck. That's probably my biggest pet peeve. Is it will tell you that the combine is stuck when it needs to be unloaded. which I guess is that it's stopped, and that's what it's reading from the information. One of the things you'll find when you get into painting is, for instance, this area here, there's some low spots in that. When you're painting, it tends to show those up better for whatever reason than some of the dirt textures, I guess. The only issue is then you have to go back to your texture and make your brush the size you want it again anytime you go out and back in. Be careful guiding your mouse with your controller, which is kind of what I was just doing there, because if you release too soon, what'll happen is it'll jump and you'll wind up having to go back, find it, and fix it, that area where it jumps. So I tend to move with my controller and paint with my mouse, and once you're really good at it, you can actually move along like what I'm doing here and paint big areas. But you see, you get that little jump there. So if I had been closer to the edge when it did that, it would have actually painted out onto my grass, and I'm going to have to go back and fix it. When you're filling big areas, that's actually really handy to have, that being able to paint and move at the same time. I tend to paint all of my area where I'm going to park and things one color or one paint texture, just to make life a little more uniform. Now I'm going to come back over here and grab the truck and go test some of my ramping areas and make sure that they're smooth. See, like here, this is going to be a really good transition spot right in here. There's, see that big bump? We're going to fix that right quick. Some of this stuff will actually fix itself as you add structures to the map, but I try to make sure that it's as flat as I can get it before I actually start doing that, because it just makes life easier is all. Because some of the objects, when you set them here on the map, don't particularly like being on uneven ground. So normally what I try to do is lay out my area as I have here, make it as natural as I can, and still get the view that I want, which is this view here. I mean, that's pretty phenomenal view all the way around. The next thing I try to do is get my ins and my outs laid out for my auto drive course for this particular area. So what I'll do next is come down here to where I actually reshaped this ramping up area. And we'll probably go all the way down to the roadway there. And back to landscape. Landscape paint. And I think I'm going to use this Dunkel asphalt texture, which is a little different than what we have here, because again, we are gravel here, but this will create us a nice differentiation between the asphalt area for the farm main area and the roadway here. As you can see, since the road is a model, some of the color is actually made into that roadway, and as such we won't be able to do much about editing that. But it's kind of one of those things you kind of learn to live with a little bit in the game. The only way to fix it would be to actually go out to the editor and possibly pull a piece of that out in editor and repaint that.